So today we are talking about the Wausau Snowplow. This is part of our ongoing program in which we have spent this month looking at the companies and the products that have put Wausau on the map. These are the places that, you know, the name Wausau is in the company or the product, as in the case here. Actually, in both cases, Wausau Snowplow was made by Wausau Iron Works. And the success of the product then gets the name out there. And I don't know how many people saw the name Wausau on the side of a snowplow, that was in the mid 20th century and thought, oh, that's a place, but it certainly helped to get the name out there. And so we're going to talk about that history and how this all came to be. But before I get there, I think it's worth stepping back and talking just a little bit about, snow removal. Because snow removal is a challenge, and it's interesting to see, whether you live here in the 1850s or the 1950s, probably in the 2050s, you're going to have to deal with some snow. It's a reality of living in Wisconsin. But beyond that, if you want to, look at snow removal, like the county isn't going to send a guy like this out to shovel the entire county highway system or the streets of all the cities. It's not feasible. So depending on how people get around, you're going to have to adjust to best suit those needs. And what I mean by that is, if you look at, for example, in 1916, actually in the 1800s, they developed early snow plows and snow removal in the bigger cities because, you need to get around. So here they are dumping snow piles into the river or the sewer system. Sometimes they do that melt off, and that's the way you're going to get rid of the snow. But, early snow plows. But again, in a place like Marathon County, probably not as important. And because people aren't getting around in the same way. So what you have is something like this. This is breaking the road. So snow falls. If people are getting around by walking or by horse-drawn cart, or sleighs, probably in the winter, you don't necessarily need to be, remove all of the snow. You just need to make sure that you're not falling into the snow as you're walking around. So by just packing it down, what they're doing here is they've got a horse-drawn, one or two horses that are pulling a weighted down sled, and that's going to compact the snow as they went, and that allowed for people to walk over it. Now this is again great, but then when you get into new modes of transportation like the trains, for example, the railroad, with the railroad, you can't just pack down the snow and let the train go on top of it. It needs to be connecting to the rails in order to know where it's going. And yeah, you could have teams of people, but again, it's not feasible to have people with shovels doing the entire, going all the way from Chicago up to Milwaukee, up to Wausau, over to St. Paul. That's not going to work. But the trains need to run on time. So they come up with different ways of doing this. At speed, plowing through the snow and kind of pushing it up and out. Some examples of this. And the thing they're using for this is a plow, right? Well, kind of makes sense. This is what they call the buckler or a wedge plow here, the top front of the train. There's also another variant that I'm not going to get into, but it's called the rotary, which looks like something out of a, Frank Dune novel or Frank Herbert novel or something like that. That front. But yeah, this is the main inspiration then for what happens when, again, new technology emerges. What about the automobile? In the 19 teens and 20s, people are going to need to get around. And again, you can't just pack down the snow because the way this works is you need to have traction. So there's a new problem. So if you are one of, this particular picture is from 1930. There was a blizzard that hit South Dakota. And this is said to have been about 30 or so odd trucks and cars that were just abandoned on the side of the road because they couldn't go anywhere. Ideally, you don't want to wait until spring in order to hope that your car still runs. And so, we developed snowplows, which is the natural extension of this. Now, to make the Wausau snowplow, to get back to that, we need to go back to this. This is from the Sanborn map in 1912. This little, or not little, but this factory here is the Northern Boiler and Structural Steel Company, which is built in 1907. It's an Appleton-based company. They kind of put a branch over here. In the following year, they actually get bought out. A bunch of the stockholders kind of go off and start their own company here, which then becomes Wausau Iron Works. So that's what this is. This is located, this is from like the 50s or 60s. You know, here they obviously expanded quite a bit since that plat map 50 years earlier. Extra, you know, extension here and some other buildings. This is really to the south of Marathon Park. So you can see the track, and actually they did, oh, I guess I didn't put that picture in there. They did do some testing on the, you know, during the winter. They would plow at high speeds just to see, or at least it made a good photo op. But they would also, you know, do some testing because they had this nice track to do it on. And then you have the railroad, and it's just a good place for business at that point in time. So their primary thing, like as the original boiler and structural steel, they made boilers and structural steel, and that becomes kind of part of their deal here. You can see, you know, here they are. They provided 170 tons of structural steel to the Marathon Electric Manufacturing Company for their facilities. You know, fabrication beam, fabricated brick beam, I should say, flume section. They did interesting odd things like the ski jump over at Stark Street, or the Wasquito jump back in 1929. They provided the steel and built a structure for the slide. Talked at length about this before, so we won't get into that story. If you want, you can go back and revisit the ski jumping video that we did. But again, kind of odd things. Whenever somebody needed some work, they would step up and do it. But their big thing that they end up doing is they find a lot of business doing bridges. So they provide the steel for the Sturgeon Bay Bridge, for example, which is the longest bridge in Wisconsin. This is built in like 1929, 1930. There's a lot of examples of this. Another one is the Stevens Bridge in Wausau. They did one up in Merrill. We could go and spend a whole time just talking about the bridges they made. So I'm going to kind of keep it simple. We're going to move on, but you know, bridges is a big part of what they're doing. But what we're really here to talk about, of course, is not bridges, it's the snowplow. And this is the product that gets created between 1920 and 1922. They're in development of it, and then they start producing it in 1922. It's usually the dates. They partner with this, by the way, with a guy named Ed Drott, who you may have heard of. He grew up in Butternut, Wisconsin, you know, got into the lumber industry, realized the advantages of this new mechanization and how much labor it saved to just have, you know, handy stuff that you can use to save labor when you're moving stuff around or you know, that sort of thing. And so in 1916 or 1918, there's some discrepancy there, but he starts the Drott Tractor Company, which is sort of a retailer for like tractors and implements and things like that. And as time goes on, he's going to become, and the Drott Company is, you know, if you know anything about the Drott name, you probably know it's a big deal later on. But this is one of the first things that you know, big breakthroughs is he helps to develop along with the Heinzens. And I have to make a point to correct something here. So this is the two pictures that we used in our exhibit. If any of you saw our manufacturing exhibit, Generations of Progress, a few years ago, this is the two pictures. And I realized from doing this research for this is the wrong person here. I think this may be the right John. I think there was also a brother John, but I actually had a hard time coming up with the genealogy, but it's actually his brother, Anton Heinzen, and they were kind of the ones that did this. Ray goes off and is involved in the creation of JARP, along with a bunch of other Wausau Ironworks guys, but that's another story for another time. The point is, these guys developed the snowplow. Wausau Ironworks then produces it, and Drott has sort of the distribution rights. They distribute it for a long time until JARP comes around and they start distributing it later in the scheme of things too. But yeah, the Wausau snowplow. So this is obviously a later advertisement here, but it gives you kind of an idea. Different types of them that are developed. The V plow for high speed clearing on both sides. You need to brake sort of what do you call it, a drift or something like that. You could use that. Got extra extensions and wings to give it extra lift to get it away. If you're just on streets, you can use one of these trip blades, which are either fixed or can be maneuvered so that they can catch both sides of the road. Yeah. Lot of different versatility. Obviously, these pictures are from a later date, some of the early ones. And actually, the reason I put this in here is to show the real genius behind this. But this is a Caterpillar. This is one of in the 20s, this is typically what they would be attached to for the most part. But again, the hydraulics, that's the real revolutionary thing here. So the thing about a snowplow is you need, again, in order for it to be effective, you need to clear the ice and snow off of a street. But in order to do that, you basically have to get the snowplow right down to the street level. But you can't have it, it needs to be kind of fixed in such a way that it's not going to damage the street. But also, maybe it's not ideal to have your vehicle driving around with a snowplow all the way down all the time. So you need to be able to position it, maneuver it for sort of make adjustments as you need to. And these hydraulics were perfect for this. And so by combining this steel, plow, basically, take the inspiration from the plows that you'd use and you can kind of see that in the train plows, like to plow a field, you'd kind of pull it and kind of create that similar idea. But now we're attaching it to a vehicle with some hydraulics, which allowed for a lot of flexibility. And this becomes really, really popular. They produce a lot of them and they get shipped all over the country. So for example, we go back to this example here, one of 30 odd cars abandoned in South Dakota. Well, eventually it gets plowed out. It's saved. It doesn't have to wait until spring in order to get free. It is plowed out thanks to a fleet of trucks and plows, including, here we go, South Dakota State Highway Commission using the Wausau Snowplow. So that's cool. Obviously, this is a little later. This is not 1930. This is probably like 40s, 50s, but yeah, used all over the place. Another example here in 1927, Escanaba, Michigan, way up in the in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a community in which kind of remote, gets a bit of snow over the years for sure. They in 1927 get a new Wausau snowplow, and it's so exciting that they put a notice in the paper. Hey, we get the plow. They get another one in 1929. And then there's another report here, which I don't know if you can see that here. I'll just quick. My video. Here is the, Munsing streets are different now because they've been plowed. Thanks to a new FWD truck, many workmen, and a Wausau snowplow and Caterpillar tractor. So yeah, put my video back on here. So there's also a lot of times, and this is kind of the genesis of this whole theme for this month, of people who go out and, for example, they might be traveling through the western part of the country in Northwest Canada, and while they're passing, Colorado at the altitude of 11,050 feet, there's a clearing on the side of the road with a Wausau snowplow made by Wausau Ironworks, and they report this. Hey, we saw this thing. Another example here being some travelers, I think this is 20, on the left it's 29, and I think this is maybe like 34. So kind of early here, and still exciting, but yeah, they're traveling back from Wilmer, Minnesota by automobile, and they noted that there are several counties using the Wausau snowplow. Perhaps this one. Again, a little later picture, but this was the snowplow using the Wausau snowplow in the outskirts of St. Paul. So it's used all over the place. This is pretty cool. They capitalize on this. Of course, the snowplow is a great product, but it's kind of niche. So we need to kind of expand and grow our business. And so they go into other snow removal things like the snow throw rotary snow plow and loader, which is what this is. So you have a truck, and this would kind of go along. Again, just pushing the snow to the side is great, but at some point you might not want to have huge piles of snow. So this is basically a big old snow blower that then pushes it into the bed of a truck. This is just one example of many of these sort of devices that are used. They get into all sorts of other things, non-snow removal products, stuff that is being used to grade, and with roads and stuff like that. Again, this sort of quasi-partnership with Drott works very well. Drott gets into that in a big way. That's kind of their bread and butter, is construction equipment for like roads and stuff like that. Yeah. And they do purchase other lines of other things. For example, in let me check my notes here, 68. they purchase a flatbed trailer model that they can produce from the La Crosse trailer company. There's a lot of this. And to be honest, I decided not to go into the nitty gritty of here's when they got this model and here's when they got this model. Wausau Iron Works throughout this period is making snowplows, they're making bridges, they are making, anchors for boats, for sportsmen, they're making grill covers, they're making all sorts of just miscellaneous stuff. They continue to have that sort of multifaceted business where they're not just producing one thing, although, these are obviously big. And I decided not to go through all of that stuff because honestly, it's kind of boring to me to have to go through, okay, every couple of years, let's say the addition to the factory, or they bought this line, because it just kind of becomes a lot of noise. I'm sure there are some people out there, you might really enjoy that. Nothing against those people. But I think for most of us, it's probably better to keep a broader, at least for now. Maybe we can come back and revisit some stuff if you're really interested. So the next stage happens in 1971. So remember Ed Drott. Well, this is his son. Ed Drott Sr. passes away in the 50s. His sons take over the company, including Ed here. Again, there's a whole story of the Drott, case sort of side of things, but we're not getting too deep into that. The main thing is that Ed Drott Jr. Then in 1971, he purchases the Wausau Iron Works plant, the controlling interest. And he makes some big changes. Now he gets involved in the past couple years, he's been working to develop a new piece of equipment, which he calls the load handler. I don't know if you can see this. This is a book by James Grant that kind of tells the whole history. Has done a lot of stuff here. Actually here, I can, some brochure here. Basically, this is a specialized piece of equipment that combines a forklift to kind of move up and down, and then a telescoping sort of thing to allow you to kind of reposition things. And it allowed for some very specific kind of adjustments and, to do a lot of different things, actually. It had a lot of potential, and it does. And so Ed sees the potential here. He buys Wausau Iron Works and says, we're going to make this, and they start doing that. He changes the whole name of the company in 1972 to Load. The Load Corporation, which, by the way, I often fall into this, and I'm sure some people do as well. Sometimes if you know where that comes from, Load, L-O-E-D, actually comes from his first two letters of his name and the first two letters of his wife, Lois, I think. So Low Ed. But it's not Loed, it's Load. That's the way you'd pronounce it. But anyway, now we're known as Load here. And they continue to do all these sort of things. But in 1981, they decide to really go heavy into the load handler. They see that as the future, and they decide we're going to sell off all of our snowplow division. And they say, hey, it's less than 15% of our sales. It's not going to be, we're going to focus on what the future is going to be. And unfortunately, by divesting them of these lines of these successful products that they've been doing for a long time, and really getting into the, this new future, which is kind of this new technology, they're not really insulated when in 1981 and 82, there's a national depression, or maybe a recession is a better word. There's a real steep decline in people that are making, construction and things like that. And so, 1982, about a year after getting rid of the snowplows, they file for reorganization, which is a charitable way of saying they filed for reorganization with the bankruptcy court. So bankrupt. The industry is going through some tough times. They then sell off the load line, which is the thing that they've been doing, to another company. Hold on. Well, yeah, another company. I won't get into that story. Again, I think if you're interested in tracking the load handler, that piece of equipment, this may not be a bad thing, because maybe this new company, which does continue to produce it and develop it, they're in a better situation to really take advantage of this and grow this product. But for the Wausau plant here, the Ironworks, it becomes Wausau Ironworks after the load handler line goes elsewhere. And this period, they go from about 140 employees down to about 50. And their business policy then becomes, he says in here, they're probably going to be doing subcontract work for other companies. The real problem here, of course, is that now they don't have something to produce. And if you go back to what you were doing back in 1910 of just kind of being a subcontract for other companies, it's not as viable as a business as it is in 1981, 92, as it was in 1910. And so ultimately, 2 years later, or less than 2 years later, it goes under, close their doors, and it goes up for auction. The building is still there. It's still available for rent, although it's probably seen better days. But yeah, kind of I don't know how to really kind of pitch this as, or I feel kind of obliged to kind of comment on the legacy here. It's kind of a weird ending, as a lot of these companies unfortunately tend to be. The Wausau Snowplow was this vibrant thing that got the name out there. It was a very successful company. Wausau Iron Works certainly did very well over the years. And then it kind of abruptly, over the course of 4 years, goes from one thing to non-existence. And you could maybe get into, I don't know. I think maybe it's better to focus on the legacy. And, honestly, by the 1980s, maybe the Wausau Snowplow wasn't as vibrant or as successful as a product as it once was. But regardless, that's the story. And yeah, certainly an interesting legacy. And there's still Wausau Snowplows out there. You can still find them on eBay or whatever. I'm sure they're still being used in some places to some extent or another. But yeah. And this is actually kind of, interesting. Of the 5 companies that we've been talking about this month, 4 of them are no longer around in the way that they were. But the one that is what we're going to talk about next week, Wausau Homes. So Gary Gisselman will be back, and he'll be telling you about the legacy and the history of Wausau Homes and the Wausau home. So we hope you will come back for that next week. Again, as always, Thursday at 12:30. Yeah. Yeah. While I'm plugging things, coming up at the end of the month on April 24th, Brett Barker will be back once again to talk about the Civil War, and this time he's talking about the women in the Civil War, the stories of women, the stories that are seldom told, as he's titled it, and that'll be a great presentation if you're interested in Civil War history or just women's history, or just want to here's an interesting talk. Again, that'll be on Saturday, April 24th at 2 p.m. And that concludes the end of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Have a lovely afternoon, and we will see you next time.